Oh, hey, I totally forgot we were even doing a show today. I was just sitting out here in front of the dumpster with my friends, doing some dumpster diving. I think this is going to be like the best Fearless ever. I'm not kidding.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I've got Jonathan Bloom, who's a freelance writer, blogger, journalist. What else? Author, right?
Yeah, a little bit of that.
And you wrote an amazing book, American Wasteland. I have yet to read it, but I have got it on my reading list. It's pretty good, though, right?
I'm supposed to say it's excellent.
Excellent.
Yes.
That's what the publisher tells you to say? The standard answer is excellent.
Compelling.
It looks good. Awesome cover. I don't know if you can see this, but it's a trash can full of food. We're going to be talking all about like what is going on in America and the amount of food that we just throw away, just flat throw away. Also with me, I've got Josh Kunau.
Yeah, Kunau.
Did I say that right?
Pretty close.
Kunau, that's what you said. And then
Yeah.
I said Kunau, and then you said it was close. It
Yes.
seems like I nailed it.
You did.
All right.
Perfect.
I rarely get the names right. And Josh is the publisher of Dive, or not publisher, producer of Dive, the movie.
Yes.
Which is kind of on fire. Here's the DVD.
Yes.
We're going to be
now.
giving away. Can we
Yes.
give away some DVDs?
Yes, we
during
have two
the show?
here for you.
And
Absolutely.
we're going to be giving away some books and some DVDs to the best questions that come tweeted in later on. And this thing is on fire at festivals, right?
Yeah, we're actually pretty. We thought we were done with the festival run, but it keeps going. It's now won 21 festivals, and it doesn't stop. They're even re-showing it at festivals around the world this year, where it won last year. So it just kind of keeps going.
Why would they do that?
Because they like it.
They just dig it. And they're like, we want to do
Because
this
food
again.
waste, I think food waste continues to pick up, and
Yeah.
people still want to keep talking about
So
it.
like last year, they're like, this is kind of weird, you know, and then this year, like, everyone's talking about food waste. We got to get that film back.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the case.
Yeah. So, you know, what we had planned to do, and you and I talked about it, was we've got the dumpster here, and what we wanted to do last night was do some dumpster diving.
Right.
And then come and you know, grill up the food. Now, we don't have the food from a dumpster. We just have food, and we have our dumpster, and we're sort of creating the concept around dumpster diving. But you know, I watched the movie, and the food that you guys pull out of a dumpster, because you hear like eating out of the trash, and you know, you have this conception that's like roadkill, I guess. Kind of.
Right.
Like just really
People
nasty,
imagine half-eaten sandwiches.
maggot encrusted stuff. And it's
Right.
not like you watch the movie and it's like perfect steak still in the wrapper and the date says it hasn't expired, and it, you know, and every kind of vegetable and a lot of you know, strawberries, right? Just full things of strawberries that look perfect.
It's so strange in our society that people expect food to look perfect on the shelves, and once it doesn't, or once you get close, it's even close to the expiration date, the stores throw it out. And what they do at the end of each night is a lot of times they go around, meat still perfectly cold, wrapped in the cellophane and the plastic. They just start taking off the shelf, put it in a plastic bag, and put it in the dumpster. And so when you go out there to it, it's still like you would find it on the shelf. It's just now double wrapped in a plastic bag and in a dumpster. And if you get there at the right time, it's still cold, typically, or even frozen.
And the idea of how perfect it has to be, because I mean, in the movie you see them opening up stuff, it looks absolutely perfect. It's like, oh, we'll need to remove these 3 strawberries.
Right.
You know, like those were kind of bad. But yeah, I mean, that's maybe what the American consumer expects at the store now. It's got to be, I'm not going to buy it. They know, you know, once it gets like that, no one's going to buy it. But literally, it's 2 or 3, you know, a small portion of the food, easy enough to just move it aside, right?
Yeah, well, with that example of strawberries, for example, the stores just aren't going to invest that labor in opening up a container and taking out the couple bad ones. It's just all cast aside, and there really isn't that attention paid to trying to fix any kind of blemish on a food, and we expect it to look pristine, and when things aren't, like Josh said, it's just cast aside. And that's happening all throughout the food chain, not just at supermarkets.
So Do you have some statistics? You wrote a book on this. You
Stats.
probably have some
Yeah,
stats
I've got one or two,
in terms
sure.
of food waste.
Yeah, so when you look at all of the food produced in America, 40% of it isn't consumed.
I'm going to put these on the grill
Yes,
while we talk.
yes, do that. And I'm sure that wasn't food that you were thinking about throwing out, right?
We were not going to throw this
No,
out.
no, no. We're gonna use that.
We're gonna eat it.
And then when you think about the household level, people out there, how much are they throwing out in their homes? The best estimate I have is that about 25% of what we bring into our houses isn't actually used. So it's pretty astounding. You total that up, it's about $2,200 a year for the average family of 4.
That they waste.
Yeah,
in
that they're
food.
just tossing.
And then as a country, it was what percentage?
40%.
40%.
Yeah.
So of all the food, and what does that mean? All the food we make, or all the food that goes into grocery?
All the food that's grown or produced, basically raw products, raised or grown on farms, doesn't include stuff that we import.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that's at about the same level of
Yeah.
wastage.
So some people might be watching and they're like, well, I don't like it when one of the strawberries is bad, or it's like I would throw that away.
Totally.
Right? So,
No, that makes a lot
some
of
of us
sense.
are like that,
yeah,
right?
but at the same time, I
You know when
understand.
you know what happens.
Oh, yeah,
It gets
I mean,
a little soft. You can't eat it.
Sure. Well, but you could bake it into something. You
I
could
can't.
make strawberry muffins.
I'm just saying, what if
I'm
I
sure you
can't?
could.
What if I can't? Part of the issue with this is there are people who are going hungry, in this country and elsewhere. And when we went to go dumpster dive, you said there's no good dumpsters around. They're all locked.
Here in Colorado, there's
Colorado.
It's different in different states and regions and depending on the stores as well. But here in Colorado, after I moved here from California, and if I tried to go to any dumpsters, it really a lot of them are locked, and there's actually it's at least one step better because a lot of the Whole Foods compost. But even then, one Whole Foods store that I had tried to work with to get them to donate more food, and they started donating more food. The manager left, and not long after that I found 2 dumpsters outside that are now locked every night, and they say compost on it. And I've tried to see what's inside, but there's just a lot of food piled up in there that they just keep throwing out. So it's more and more we have locked dumpsters. Here in Colorado, it's especially dumpster diving is not great. There are some stores that still have open dumpsters you can find, but most of them compost. And some do good, like Whole Foods in Boulder. They donate, I think, most of their food 7 days a week.
And that's
they really try.
Is that the main thrust of what you guys would like to see change? Is donations or what? Where should the change be?
We're pushing with our Eat Trash campaign. We're pushing for actual corporate policies, store-wide policies. What happens with Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, places like that is they have some stores and some people who are doing an amazing job and donating food 7 days a week to food banks, and then you have other stores that aren't doing anything, and all the food just ends up in the trash. And so we ask for corporate policies so that it's across the board. Everyone does the same thing.
When you throw away 40% of your food as a country, what does that amount to in dollars? Because we're worried about things like dollars, right? Like, hey, we don't have an unlimited budget.
No, it definitely adds up. It's about $240 billion a year on national level. Certainly money we could better spend elsewhere.
It's like today, I don't even know if 240 billion is a lot, or you know what I mean, with the numbers that get thrown out. But that's a very big number, actually.
So it's a pretty big number. But to give you an image, America produces enough waste every day to fill the Rose Bowl, and that's that tiny little 90,000 seat stadium down the road in California.
Yeah.
So
and you fill it to the top.
Yeah, to the brim, not just the playing field.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're ever going to actually do that experiment, but it'd be pretty interesting to see what that actually looks like.
See if anyone would be up
for
that.
It's roughly, the estimates are about 96 billion pounds of food a year.
And then we're probably skipping ahead a little bit too much, but remember, if you want to tweet in questions to us, it's at Fearless Force. If there's things I'm not asking and you want to ask, we'll check them out here. They come in here and I can ask them. But when you throw away food, there's no away as well, right? Food doesn't necessarily just go away.
No, and that's the problem. It's 97% of it ends up in a landfill where it ends up creating methane, which is a greenhouse gas. It's much more harmful than CO2. So we're basically aiding climate change from our kitchen waste bins. And it's nice to see communities that are composting, like they're doing here in Boulder, but that's not the best use of resources. I mean, so much oil and water goes into growing our food that to turn around and then get some of those resources back through composting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a plus. It's a nice thing, but my goal, and I think Josh would agree, is to try to actually use that food.
Because, well, we're talking about throwing away food, right? And I guess when you think about that, part of what I wonder is what percentage of that food that we threw away is edible? Are you saying that all that food was still food when we threw it away? That number of 40%?
In the film, one expert, Timothy Jones, says that when we talk about 40% of food, that's food that is up and ready to be eaten by someone and never makes it into someone's stomach. So most of that food could be consumed, and we're overproducing. Basically, we're producing 200 times our energy consumption here in the U.S., and then that gets thrown away. And
our personal energy consumption,
exactly,
like what we could possibly use as calories, we overproduce.
Right. Right. We're producing almost 2 times as much food as we need here in the U.S. And so from there, you talk about composting and the effect that has on everything. That's almost 50% of the water that went into producing it, the fossil fuels that go to transporting it, the soil degradation that we're producing, and then you talk about the humanitarian and the hunger aspect. We have 40 million people now on food stamps here in the U.S., and we're still overproducing by 40% or more, and that's just going to waste. And even when you talk about composting, you can compost fruits, vegetables, things like that, but meats you really can't compost. That really is bad for composting a lot of the time. So it just kind of ends up rotting in the landfills.
Well, some of the larger composting operations can take meats and dairy, but yeah, that's probably better served going to a waste-to-energy plant where we could actually get some renewable energy created from our wasteful habits.
But when you talk about the waste and you talk about the dollars, are you capturing the dollars that they went into the production of that food too? When you have that $200 and some billion number.
No, that's
just the food itself.
Yeah, the value of that product.
So it doesn't include all the energy, water, et cetera, that went into that.
No, and frankly, they're often separate. Like the environmentalists think about the resources that go into it, and the USDA and some of the larger ag people think about the dollar value.
I mean, a lot of where this is happening, it's happening with government and government's interaction with food and food policy. It's also happening just purely in the private sector. You know, there's so many people out there are just saying, we got to cut spending, They're focused on government spending. And being more efficient there. What's the process where you become more efficient in food? What does that look like?
On the government level?
No, actually more on the private side.
Okay, so
well give me both.
Well, I mean, one example for federal spending, you've got the National School Lunch Program, and so we're feeding a lot of kids in this country, and a big argument is on what kinds of foods we're serving, which is certainly valid. You know, we don't want to be feeding kids crap. So a lot of good people have focused on that. I'd like to get a handle on how much food actually isn't being consumed by students, and then sort of what's happening because of that. So we're basically teaching kids that it's okay to throw away food, that's no big deal, partly because of what we're serving, but partly because of how we serve it, where we just give kids a tray with everything on it and don't allow for any choice.
Right.
So there's one example where we could save a decent amount of money. And then on an individual level, there's a lot of things that people can do at home, whether it's not buying as much food. That's probably the number one thing I'd advise.
Yeah.
I mean,
how do you make leftovers cool?
I would love to find out. I'm trying to do that.
Stews.
I mean, I think leftovers are great. I'm a leftover lover, but we need to sort of get the general population into it.
Yeah.
Well, I think going back to what you were just asking in the private sector, how to fix the problem, I don't know exactly what the answer to that is. I do know that it's the more we've researched this and studied this and talked to people, it's very interesting how it works, because a lot of the cost actually goes back on the manufacturers. So the stores typically don't eat the cost of wasting food, which is why they're not as concerned with it. It goes back to the manufacturers, because the stores will say, we want 600 of such and such like sandwiches pre-packaged and made, and if they only sell 400 of them, it's in the contract that actually goes back to the manufacturers, which is why the stores don't care as much about what happens with it. And so it's interesting, the whole process and how it works, and then it all falls on the consumer and their choice with the dollar, what they're going to buy and how they're going to spend it.
We're getting a lot of questions tweeted in. I one of the things that I know has been mentioned when you talk about this, right? So we're going out, we want to go out, we want to dumpster dive, the dumpsters are locked. Why are they locked instead of just open, or you know what I mean? What's the thinking that locks the dumpster?
I think at this point,
because usually when you have a dumpster, you don't kind of think like, man, I really don't want anyone taking my stuff out of this dumpster.
That is their trash, and they want to see it end up in the landfill.
It's got to be trash. Yeah.
I think more and more as dumpster diving has become more widely well known, even through the film. Unfortunately, you have the stores locking them so people can't get it. You even have stores. I've heard of.
Now you mentioned that actually.
Yeah.
Where like some people are pissed at you. Some dumpster divers
yes.
are kind of angry.
Yes.
Because they're like, this was Christmas every day,
right.
brother. And the stuff we were pulling out was amazing. And I was eating,
eating like kings. Yeah.
eating in a way that I never could afford if I went into the store.
Yeah, it's that was tough for us, because we fully appreciate that, and we really respect that as well. We don't want them to lock the dumpsters. We don't want them to then start pouring bleach on the food like they have.
That's another so it's like if the dumpster is unlocked, people are pouring bleach on
the stores. Some of the employees, I just heard of a Trader Joe's that was doing that, pouring bleach on the food so no one could take it. And
so unethical.
I know. It's just
crazy.
There's just we've lost our connection with food completely. Yeah. But yeah, we've gotten that
set fire to money.
Exactly.
Like what else are we doing?
But it's interesting in that our philosophy was we would rather expose this, see change, see federal legislation, see something that really promotes this food going to people who need it.
Yeah.
And it's bigger than just one person. Yes, it's great for one person to be able to go and grab that food, but we have to make a change. And we'd rather see empty dumpsters and full stomachs than see be able to go dumpster diving every night and grab the food. Right. So
I would hope that dumpster divers would be okay with so-called being put out of business, like having no food go to the dumpster.
But I could see why they're frustrated now, because they're being put out of business, not because the food's going to shelters or things like that,
right?
Or that there's less food being wasted. They're being put out of business because, well, let's talk about that, because I think there may be concerns about liability, right? That the stores may have concerns about liability.
Sure.
Yeah.
Someone's here picking up our dumpster.
And false concerns about liability.
Talk about that, because you're not just a producer; you're a lawyer.
Right. Yes, which actually in a number of film festivals, after speaking engagements, people have said, I think the problem is all the lawyers, and I try to explain it's not, but I understand their concern.
No, the problem's all those other lawyers.
Right. There's
awesome.
It kind of starts at the very beginning, in that they're back in the 90s, through Bill Clinton, he signed the Good Samaritan Act, which says that basically as long as the stores or the companies are not grossly negligent, as long as they don't look at the food and see that it's rotting and give it away to someone, they're not going to be held criminally or civilly liable. They can't be, so it's a protection for them. The stores all know about it. A lot of stores try to tell their employees and each individual store to remember that and to go ahead and donate the food. The problem is it's really strange. We get a lot, even the other day we got an email where someone says, well, state and federal laws don't allow it. It's not true. You can give the food away. From there, they say that food banks don't want the food.
Sometimes when you have like misconceptions like that, and they're pretty widespread, which this one is, there's somebody behind it. Do you feel like there's somebody behind that misconception, or is it just lawyers have made us afraid to do anything right. Sorry.
I think so. No, it's okay. I think so. We do live in a very litigious society where people are afraid of this sort of stuff. And even at the same time, even if there isn't actual court litigation, companies can still be persecuted in the public spotlight if they were to give bad food to someone. At the same time,
why can't they be persecuted for locking their dumpsters and pouring bleach on
I
them?
wish they could be, because it really is just terrible that they're wasting all this food when people need it.
Yeah.
Basically what it comes down to is we get a lot of these sort of issues and questions and comments and people coming at us saying they're not allowed to give the stores away, or we have a store that donates all their bread and cheeses and things like that, but there's still all this produce they don't, and so they donate what they think they can, and then they just throw the rest away. Food banks are willing to take it. Believe it or not, when we talk about Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, people get really defensive because of their reputation that they portray. And yet, we always tell them that through Feeding America, they've actually, Feeding America has worked out a deal with Walmart and Kroger's to adopt zero waste corporate policies. And so Walmart's doing it, is implementing it, Kroger's is implementing it, but Whole Foods can't. Trader Joe's can't. These other places that really show that you're supposed to be concerned can't do it.
It's annoying in some ways how often Walmart lately comes up as a positive example. And
I know.
People read in dude, it's Walmart.
Right.
And I'm like,
no one wants to sing their praises, but
Right.
they are actually doing a nice job with.
And
with
I
food
didn't
waste.
even know that in food. So it's like in other areas we do this
Yeah.
show and we talk about what they're doing around a sustainability index and
They
carbon. But now something in food.
Yeah, they came out and said I think they were given about $200 million to hunger-related issues. Really, they're just not wasting food anymore. They're giving it away to the food banks, which Feeding America has organized where all the food will go, how to pick it up, how it needs to be handled. Yeah. They have books on all of it and how to do it, and that was really just donations.
And isn't Walmart the largest grocer in America now?
Yeah,
so,
by far. Yeah.
So is it done? Are we done then?
No.
I hate to
no.
tell you. Great show.
Costco, right?
Should we just leave early?
No, Costco's. I mean, it still goes back to the producers, the people who are actually producing the food. Like I think in your book, you even talked about going to the farmer with lettuce. That there's just lettuce all over the place because they.
Yeah, I mean,
just to stay on the liability thing, because
Sure.
there was one thing you brought up earlier, and it was sort of surprising to me that the store doesn't. It's not their food they're throwing away. They're throwing away the providers' food,
manufacturers,
the manufacturers' food. If that's true, do you think that they would maybe feel, and this is not liability, just uncomfortable claiming that we're giving away all this food? Meanwhile, I'm just thinking about Walmart,
Right.
Some of the people who are providing that food to Walmart are going, you're giving away my food, and then I'm paying for that food to be put back on the shelves because you didn't sell it. Hold up on that number a little bit, fella.
That's actually an interesting question. I have not dealt with that. I have not heard that coming from the manufacturers.
It does feel like there needs to be, if you're going to give food in that way, there needs to be a different accounting back to the manufacturer.
Well, the strange thing is that the stores that do donate food don't seem to want to take any credit for it, and I don't understand why. I mean, it seems like if you're helping people who don't have enough to eat, you'd want to trumpet that and really spread that word. But,
right.
But quite the opposite. They want to keep it kind of hush-hush. And, I mean, I always like to talk about Walmart's policies because they are actually doing a good thing, and I think they should get some publicity for it.
And they're trying to keep a lid on it?
I mean, Walmart's actually one of the few supermarkets or large grocers that actually does talk about it. But all supermarkets, some of their stores give food, but they just don't really spread the word.
So okay, you had mentioned earlier, not on the show, but earlier, no one has ever successfully sued for getting bad food out of a dumpster.
Well, there hasn't been any kind of lawsuit where a grocer or anyone who's given away food has been sued, but these retailers often use that as kind of the thing that they'll hide behind.
And there's the act,
Good Samaritan,
the Good Samaritan Act that protects them. There's also state legislation in many cases that may protect them. So there's all of these mechanisms that allow them to give, but they don't. And then if they do, they don't make much noise about it. Do you think it all still keeps coming back to I'm concerned I'm going to get sued? And how do you just get it out there finally you don't get sued? In fact, you're being sued more often for slippery floors. You know what I mean?
Right.
Customers are getting hurt in your store. They're not getting hurt in the dumpster, and they're not getting hurt when you donate food. that's doing a ton of good.
Yeah, it's difficult. We've met and talked with Dan Glickman. He used to be the former Secretary of Agriculture, and he is the one who actually put together the Good Samaritan Act under Bill Clinton, and which it was signed. And this is back in the 90s. Like, they actually haven't, since the 90s when there was a big push on this, it's just been dropped. About mid-90s, 94, 95, 96, they stopped doing studies to find out how much food is being wasted. They stopped, and they stopped promoting it. It just hasn't gone anywhere, and yet it's been there for a long time.
It's a problem hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to get people to think about it, both individuals and retailers, and even on a larger level, I'm looking at all the food thrown out before it leaves the farm, even, or stuff that doesn't leave the farm.
Well, let's take in some tweeted questions. So Kadisco says, seems like we're talking about food grown and raised in the U.S. What about imported foods? How much comes from abroad, and how do we deal with that?
Well, what I know about imported foods is that at the borders...
Was that a good question?
Yeah, that's a pretty good
Kadisco?
question.
Is that like a book-worthy question, do you think?
It's like in the running.
That's kind of how I feel about it.
Someone would have to knock it off, I think.
Okay. So could happen for you.
Possibly.
So keep them coming.
We have 2 books to give away, too.
Yeah.
And some DVDs.
And films. And dive the film.
With imported food, a lot of times it's produce coming from Central America. What happens is at the border crossings, there are inspections, and we're pretty stringent on what does and doesn't make the cut, and things that don't look perfect aren't even allowed to enter the country. So there are some food recovery groups who are operating at the borders in Texas and in Arizona, but a large amount of food doesn't actually make it into the country.
And does it necessarily get wasted, or
from what I've heard anecdotally, there are piles where this stuff sort of accumulates along the border.
There was actually just a UN study about 3 weeks ago, that said 1/3 of food worldwide is wasted.
How big would we be if we ate all the food as a country? Have you done that math?
We're pretty big already.
No, I know. We're obese. Yeah, we're obese. We're diabetic. I'm just wondering.
We produce about twice the amount of food that we need
Would
on
we
a calorie level. I mean, that Monty Python scene with the man eating in a restaurant?
Have another bite.
Exactly. Just bucket.
It's wafer thin. Yeah.
I think we're about at that wafer point. We might be. No, but there was a great stat that came out back in the 90s, back when we were actually researching this topic, that said if we were to reduce waste by 25%, we could feed all the hungry people in America. So
25%?
That doesn't seem too difficult. I mean, especially when you look at supermarket dumpsters, and the average supermarket's throwing out about 800 pounds of food a day.
Yeah, and with the cost of
is there a global solution to this too? Like, if we were eating the food we needed and not wasting, are we already making enough food for the planet? You hear so much about that. That's feeding the planet.
It's a big argument with GMOs.
It's a big argument with GMOs and that kind of technology. We have to feed the planet. And meanwhile, maybe Monsanto could figure out how we don't waste the food.
That's my point here. Is let's think about efficiency before we just blindly turn to
Why
GMOs.
is efficiency so appealing when we think about the government? I want you to be efficient, but when it's us, it seems to be fairly unappealing. Or if it's a grocery store, it's unappealing.
Well, I have a guess.
Yeah.
I think you like that question.
Yeah, it's a good question.
My guess is that you're asking people to change their behavior or to do something different if it's a store, and that inertia prevents a lot of action.
And I think we just, again, I keep going back to it. We have this immense disconnect with the earth and what it produces and what we're eating. I mean, kids a lot of times don't even know what vegetables are and where they come from. I mean, there's such a disconnection to it that most people under 30 do not, they're afraid of food. They think if you bring home leftovers or if you cook something the day after, it's bad. It's gonna rot and hurt you. And so there's just this huge disconnect with food, or when it's good, when it's gone bad.
We don't really understand. When you in the movie, should talk more about the movie because it's a great film.
Sure.
Won a lot of awards. It's still out there. You're working on distribution.
Yes, it'll actually be distributed July 19th on DVD and iTunes and hopefully Netflix. We actually need people to go on and save it in their queue because that's how Netflix does it now before they pick it up is they go on there. And you can go to our Facebook page and there's a link on there to go and request it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But we did as a culture, and it's kind of interesting when you're watching the movie. I mean, you see things pulled out of the dumpster and it's, a little fillet or something. You're like, man, I don't know.
Like 20 broiler chickens.
And it looks good, but I'm not sure I got the nose anymore, right? Like,
I think you do. I think
humans
have instincts. I mean,
my wife
you
thinks I do
personally,
too, because she's always like, smell this.
I'm basically saying I believe in you.
No, it's still good.
No, I think we have instincts as people, and I always tell people to trust their senses.
Yeah.
And I think you'll know if something like milk or meat has gone bad.
Milk is an easy one.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Milk's an easy one. But when something is bad for my wife, it may still be good for me. Is that true of humans?
I think in it's part of the marital setup where every relationship there's the finisher, which seems like you would be. I take that role, and then there's the squeamish one. I'm not sure about this.
Sure.
Why don't you
smell this?
Yeah.
Exactly. But I also think it has to do with your stomach. Like literally, some people probably can take a different level of badness to the food.
Well, I'm gonna defer that one.
Yeah. Do you know if there's any truth to that? Because I feel like I can eat things that would hurt.
I don't know. And as a lawyer, I'm going to say that. I'm not,
just as a lawyer, just don't eat rotten food.
Right, exactly. But I will say that Jeremy, the director and kind of the star of Dive, along with his wife and 3 kids and all of the dumpster bros, all the people who went dumpster, no one's ever gotten sick from eating dumpster food. None of us have ever been sick. So Jeremy's
so that
goes for 4 years.
That means it's a lot safer than eating out.
Actually.
Could be. And have you heard about that thing called scrounging?
I mean, the food that you get fed at a restaurant. I'm just going to go back here. Like I've been injured by some restaurants on occasion.
Oh yeah.
Food poisoning.
And you wonder what level that food was at before it got cooked up and served.
It's also, I mean, it's hard to tell with food sometimes because even meat on the shelf, I mean, people don't realize that meat goes brown pretty quickly, and they have it wrapped, and they have gases in there, and they have it, to make it look red for a much longer period of time.
So you're saying it could be brown and that's fine?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're gonna cook it. It's just that again, we've lost our sense of what happens.
One thing I would suggest if you're dumpster diving and you pull out hamburger, like. Cook it. Because hamburger, just in general, has got much more pathogens through it. If you get a cut of meat, it's a different thing.
Oh yeah,
not as an attorney or anything, but just as a dude that sniffs the bad food at home. Yeah, hamburger you got to be careful of. More so now than you used to, I think. What is this? Tweeted question, how can smaller businesses get involved? Privately owned grocers and health food stores that grow their own produce. From Ben Lobovitz. From Ben Lobovitz. At Ben Lobovitz.
That's a good question. I would absolutely contact.
That is a good question, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Contact local food banks or just Feeding America in general. Feeding America, they're trying to start with the bigger stores and work their way down, but they have a list of stores to try and see if they can help them set up donations to all their facilities to make sure people get enough food. And so if they called them and tried to work with them or figure out where to get it to, a lot of the problem is
how do they get to
no
Feeding America? Because that sounds like really good solution that's come up during the show.
Yeah, because they have food banks. I mean, even here they have the Boulder Food Share, the community food share, and that's Feeding America. Like a lot of food banks all over, and they feed just here in Boulder County. I think they feed about 50,000 people through their food bank through the donations.
So that's an umbrella organization. They link all these small food banks nationwide, but I guarantee you, if you're a store and you want to give away food, you'll be able to find some sort of food bank or shelter who will actually come to your store, pick it up, and get it to people who are hungry.
So that I think brings up another reason why I might decide as a store. You were saying earlier that there was a Whole Foods, they were giving away food, a new manager showed up, a couple weeks later the dumpsters are locked, the food's not being given away. this guy probably came in with some preconceived notions, or this woman came in with preconceived notions, and that doesn't really bear any reality. So, how do you go about keeping that from happening, or make it more systemic, where the change isn't about one person?
That's been the hard part for me personally, and for us with the film, is that the manager that I'd worked with, really great guy, really passionate about this stuff, and then he watched the film, and once he watched Dive, he was like, I get it. I want to make this store so it donates everything 7 days a week. I want to set aside room in the freezer, put food aside, make sure it's being picked up. He was so excited about it, but it was after kind of an awakening, and a lot of people don't seem to get it. We talk about this stuff, and again, people come back with state laws, federal laws, and once we explain it to them and show it to them and they see it, they want to do something different. But again, now someone else has come in and with
So the film comes out when? I'm just thinking,
July 19th.
So July 19th, if you're watching and you work at Whole Foods or you work at Trader Joe's, because a lot of awesome people work there. And I think a great process would be like do a party, with all your friends to like watch the film. Oh yeah. And then from within, it'll just become very natural. Does the film cover the fact that you're protected, that you will not be sued?
The Good Samaritan Act.
I kind of burnt these.
We'll still eat them.
You know what we ought to do? We're getting some good tweeted questions. It would be great to have people tweet in ideas too. You had talked about that, like do a brainstorm.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of creative people that watch. Like, what if people tweeted in? Here, that's for you. Tweeted in ideas about how do we stop the food waste problem, or how do we create more awareness. I think it's mostly awareness, right? Because no one thinks it's a great idea. Do you ever meet anyone who's like, if we don't waste food, then we won't make enough food? Because there probably is a neoliberal, explanation for why you'll kill the economy if you don't make too much food.
A lot of it is awareness. Yeah, a lot of it is consumer choice. People don't think that change happens. People don't think about getting involved to make change happen. It's really funny, I think, when you bring something like this up, how people respond to it. And I think, well, yeah, we shouldn't do that, but stores aren't going to change. And the CEO of Trader Joe's was speaking to, or I'm sorry, not the CEO, the senior VP of marketing of Trader Joe's was speaking to a class recently that was sending him letters asking him to adopt a corporate-wide policy. And when they asked him why he doesn't talk about food waste in their magazine, in their monthly magazine, he said, well, because food waste just isn't as sexy as chocolate-covered strawberries, and we don't really think our customers care. And once they think customers care about this stuff, they'll start making change. And
a certain amount of customers would have to be insulted by that.
Oh,
we don't,
sure.
We don't think our customers care about food waste.
So we're not going to... And they said, relatively, we've found that it's actually better for the store's bottom line to donate the food and stop wasting it. It
doesn't cost them too much. So now I've got some labor associated with my dumpster. It's really cheap to throw it straight in there. But then even if people are coming to pick it up, now I got to have some guys help out and load that stuff. That's not a problem?
No, they've actually found overall it's better for the bottom line, because right now there is some tax incentive there needs to be more, and it needs to be more discussed and widely open, but there is some incentive to donating it. So they actually get a break rather than throwing it away.
Actually feeding people, you'd think that would be incentive enough.
But let's go with the monetary incentives.
Right.
Well, yeah. There's a tax break if you donate food. So Walmart's getting a tax break on that.
That's where I said they came out and said that they stated I think it was $200 million they were going to give to hunger-related issues over the next couple of years. It was actually over the next couple of years they're going to start donating all food rather than wasting it, and they're basically giving away the equivalent of $200 million worth of food. And so that's where that comes in.
And they're also saving on their hauling costs, like what it costs to send that food off to wherever.
William Scott tweeted in, "What's the name of the film? I just tuned in." Dude, how do you think that makes us feel? You just tuned in. But the name of the film is Dive, and it comes out July
19th. Right.
And I've gotten to see it. We're also going to give away some DVDs. Should we just give William a DVD?
Sure.
For asking about the film.
I don't know what the name is. Being late to the
it's not right.
Show?
We can't reward that kind of behavior.
Sorry, William.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This T-shirt is something that that you gave me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the last ones we have right now.
I
Hopefully we'll get some more.
It is so awesome. This is, I think, my new favorite shirt. It says divethefilm.com. So go to divethefilm.com. And we would give away a T-shirt like this, except it's the last one, and it's mine, and I'm actually not willing to give it away.
Wow.
So,
That's high praise.
it's an awesome shirt. Eat trash? That's an attention getter. So, so here's a good question. 20% of food in U.S. Goes into dumpsters and landfills. How many people could that feed?
Oh, well, I mean...
Do you have that kind of statistic?
Well, I don't know about that 20% figure. And
Oh,
That's
okay.
a bit of an underestimate, but just really saving a portion of
Well,
what
what's
we
the
throw
number?
out now. Well, so 40% of all the food produced ends up being wasted. Oh, okay, I see what this person's saying. 20% of the waste stream is food. That's probably what that stat is.
Oh, okay.
And that's, the EPA put out that figure, like looking at our waste stream.
So
Here's-
of everything we throw away, 20-some% is food.
yeah, of the stuff that ends up in landfill, 20% of that is food. So, I mentioned before just a quarter of, cutting down on a quarter of our waste, we could feed more than the amount of hungry people.
So if we
it wouldn't
actually-
the real trick is redistribution.
Right.
And actually doing that.
Right.
Well, that was a question that came in about distribution. How do you create this redistribution, or are people like Feeding America already creating it for us?
Well, I mean that's a start. They are doing that kind of food recovery on the supermarket level, somewhat on the distribution level, the wholesale level. But what we really need to do is get agriculture behind this, and that's where the USDA really needs to get involved, trying to get farmers to harvest all that they grow and then actually get that to people who need it. And so they're not going to do that at their own peril or at their own cost. So that's where tax benefits need to come in, and having a Secretary of Ag like Dan Glickman was, who's actually thinking about these topics and trying to get farmers to see that they're just throwing away food that could be feeding people. And farmers don't grow food to throw it out. I mean, they hate to plow
they would
things
hate that,
under.
I'm sure.
Right. They
Yeah.
grow it to make a profit, but and you touch on
but
this in your
farmers are
book.
really
Well,
cool
they-
too.
so, I mean,
Like,
they do
farmers
to make a
really.
profit,
I mean, they must like the fact that they're in this business of nourishing people.
Especially,
and so,
yeah.
when it gets just chucked.
Well, but the way they go through it, because again, it has to look perfect on the shelf, and it has to travel there and still look perfect. That when they're picking it, if there's any imperfection or even a thought of imperfection, it's just left in the field. They just leave it and move on, and so there's a lot of it just gets thrown away.
So what about gleaning? Have you seen that movie Gleaners? I think it's called Gleaners.
Yeah, Les
Yes.
Gleaners.
Yeah.
It's a French film.
Yeah.
Yes.
But fear
That's a
not,
cool
there are
film,
subtitles.
right?
It's
Yeah.
really good.
Check
And
out that film. Les Gleaners.
Les
C'est-
Gleaners.
c'est in French.
I think.
Anna, you
something
say it
like
in
that.
French. She's not gonna say it.
All right. Well, anyway, gleaning is awesome. It's just a great way to get people involved with food, like
Yeah.
especially kids. Get them out in the fields, and
Yeah, explain what gleaning is.
so basically, it's when you pick crops that would otherwise be plowed under,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be used, and so it's kind of
Tons of Dutch paintings are of gleaners, right? And expressionist paintings where you see people in fields.
Yes.
It's that the field's been harvested, and then there's thousands of potatoes out there.
Yeah, well,
right?
the practice dates back to biblical times. I mean, there's reference to it in the Old Testament. Not to get all preachy here, but it was a little bit different there, where there was this custom where farmers would leave a corner of their field untouched. They wouldn't harvest it, and the poor would go out and take what they need. Now it's more something
They didn't
done.
lock that dumpster.
I mean, I don't think they had fences.
Would they ever
that
just
could-
leave a portion of the field, and then they would put a fence around it and not let anyone
I'm
in?
not sure about that, but fortunately, bleach hadn't been invented yet, so they
Yeah.
couldn't go that route. But anyway, it's a nice way to get people involved, and unfortunately, there's a little bit of a disconnect where it's not like the people who need food are going out and getting it. It's one level removed.
This is off topic, but the thing that cracked me up about that film, Gleaners, or one piece it was, the fact that all the potatoes that they don't harvest and they leave in the fields are the really big ones. The ones that Americans have, and like the French like the little tiny petite potatoes.
Right.
Which I've grown a taste for those. I think they're better.
Right.
Those
Yes.
mega potatoes that we love, those like they won't even eat them. They leave them in the field like they're trash. Anyway,
Well, yeah, America.
Maybe
home
it's not
home
too.
of
We like big
the massive
shit.
portions.
We like, yeah.
Oh,
but also
heck
just
yeah.
big shit. It's like, that potato's good because it's big. It's like, you know what? It's actually not as good.
Yeah, not quite as good. No,
Turns
it's
out
happening.
it's not as good.
Well, have you seen the apples that we're getting at the store today?
Yeah, they're
just
huge. They're huge,
It's like
but
a
they're
softball.
But they kind of taste like
It's
a
yeah.
potato.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Pomme de terre.
That's weird.
Yeah, I think
good.
we
God, questions coming like crazy. Hold on.
All
Go
right.
ahead. You keep going.
No, I mean I think that's part of the problem is we are drawn to these massive portions or just large produce and as a result of that, it's cool to just eat half of it and throw out the rest. I mean, but I try to draw a parallel to something like littering. I mean, when was the last time you saw someone just throw a can of soda on the ground? But 20 years ago, that used to be totally the norm.
We need the crying cowboy.
I think we
Or,
do.
I mean, Indian. Maybe in this case, a crying farmer.
Or-
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
got the crying farmer when we just toss the food into the dumpster
need
and pour
something.
bleach on it.
Yeah.
You know?
We need a mascot. We need the litter bug or the Woodsy the owl of food waste reduction.
Well, there was the notion of like clean plate, and at a time when we couldn't waste, or around the, I think clean plate maybe started First World War, not Second World War. I'm not sure.
It's
You might know.
no, it was the second. We actually talked about
Second?
that. Yeah, we
Okay.
actually talked about that. I think it was.
Yeah.
We actually talked about that a bit. It's a spot in the film in Dive
We're
where
not always a wasteful country.
We
haven't
weren't.
We were sort of the opposite.
during it used to be the ad used to be food is ammunition.
Yeah.
Don't waste it. And
Yeah.
and although we don't believe food is ammunition, it's still not wasted. They used to have the Clean Plate Club. We go into again how much in this historical piece, a little spot in the film, how we used to be and how we've gotten so far away from that. I mean, you had people gardening everywhere, growing food. It was a family thing,
Yeah.
and so there was more of a connection.
Do you think if we wouldn't
Yeah.
have wasted so much food, we would have gotten Bin Laden earlier, perhaps?
He was probably living
Let's
off
just
food.
say
he was
that.
living
Let's
off food waste, I
Yeah.
think. So.
I'm not going to touch that.
Yeah,
I know.
you shouldn't. What's the most wasted? This is a good question from John Dross Jr. At John Dross Jr. What's the number one most wasted food item at home or cooked at home? Like what are, do you know? what that
Well, I've seen it at the store
not
level
cereal.
and at
No.
at the supermarkets. The supermarkets and at schools, and it's always vegetables.
Yeah.
So, at the store level, do you have any guesses on what the number one wasted item might be?
At the store?
Yeah.
Like lettuce or something like that?
Like
Is that-
yeah, specific item.
Lettuce.
That's close. It's mustard greens and turnip greens. So, yeah,
I didn't know that.
specialty items. Yeah, it's actually more than half of those items end up being.
That's
thrown
just because
out.
people don't like those things.
Well,
like they're,
You know what?
Someone's convinced them to stock the store with too many.
All right, I'm gonna take the unconventional stand of defending mustard greens. I mean,
I don't know if I've had them. Are they
it's a
awesome?
strange item, but if you
learned
grow
about
your
kale.
own, if you know how
Yes.
to cook them, I mean, this is where we become kind of removed from
Yeah.
our foods. Then
Yeah.
you'd like it. You wouldn't just throw it
Yeah.
out. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
if you're at a school, if you're a 10-year-old or something eating the school lunch, probably not going to eat that. But if your school had something like the edible schoolyard where you actually were involved in growing that thing, you're gonna.
But it
you're
is
gonna go
knowing
for
it is knowing what to do with
Yeah.
it too, right?
That's definitely part of it. And like Josh was saying, we used to be so much more thrifty and use our food more. We've totally gotten away from that.
Stews and
Yeah.
I mean just everything that people used to do with food as it maybe started to wasn't perfect and fresh. They would again make all sorts of different things at home to use every last bite of food.
Someone's watching in Austria. We should give a book to that last question, by the way.
Yeah.
The here in Austria, supermarkets donate their leftover food to mostly private organizations who collect this and share it. That's what we want here. So.
It's
as
not
simple as
rocket
that.
science.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty easy. I think.
And is that? Do you know whether that's happening in other countries? Like, isn't it an absolute? Because it sounds here, and we don't have a lot of data, but if that's the process for every grocery, bravo.
There's a lot less waste in Europe to begin with, partly because they just don't have the space. They can't just keep digging holes in the ground and throwing things in it. So there's been an initiative, the landfill initiative, to try to. They're actually banning what you can put into the landfill. So that's actually my number one goal. If I could have one thing happen, would be to ban organics, like food and yard waste, from landfill. And I think that would really have an impact throughout the food chain.
Yeah.
But I don't know about Austria in particular, but bravo for
I know there's
that.
another book, Tristram Stewart's book Waste, where he's British, and he talks about, he was a dumpster diver there for years in England, all over England and a lot of other places in Europe, and that's where he ended up coming up with his book. And he refers to the United States, refers to Feeding America and our waste, and kind of compares the two a lot in there. So it's pretty equal. There's probably a little bit less there, especially depending on the countries. But
do you think that this is just a symptom of a larger approach to life and the economy and everything else, and that if that approach changes, this gets fixed? If that approach doesn't change, then this doesn't get fixed?
I mean, I think we are pretty careless with our resources. I think that it's part of that larger trend, and we don't treat the planet with much care. And as a result, food is one kind of resource that we're not really being careful with.
Yeah.
And it's something that we think of as our right to just throw away. But
we got taught that too, right? I mean, we went from clean plate club, right, and that ideal.
It really came with technology and the manufacturing of food, and how easily it was to produce food and manufacture it and put it on the shelf for people. It's almost like with that came this complete disconnect from the earth, and I really think so. People don't have any idea what's happening in our food today, even with GMOs, food waste, any of these things. People have absolutely no idea. They just go to the store, buy the food, and eat it and throw it, because it's always there. There's always a large mound of apples.
But if you ask my grandfather to do that or my grandmother to do that, they would say no.
Sure.
Like, no matter how abundant it was, they would say no. And at the end of the picnic, they would take out their handkerchief and take what was left, and they'd fold it up in that and stick it in.
Wow.
Because you didn't know, you had gone through times where you didn't know whether you're going to eat again, so you couldn't, right?
Well, there's that,
be
and
that
then,
way, that cavalier with food.
Right. There's those values, but we're just not teaching our kids that food is something you need to be careful with. Quite the opposite. Like at schools, where school lunch is so quick that oftentimes kids don't have enough time to eat everything. We're basically teaching them to throw it out.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to see is people actually using that, thinking of that food as a resource. And I think we can't ignore the cost of food here. Food is still tremendously cheap. And I think that really plays a role in how we don't value it.
Yeah.
I know food prices have been going up for the last couple of years, so that might seem a little bit off to folks. But when you look at food as a percentage of our household spending,
right,
it's at all-time lows, and no other country spends as little on food.
That could speak to two things, right? It could speak to the cost of food, and then also our appetite for crappy food,
crappy big food.
Yeah,
big portions at cheap prices.
Yeah, and so how do you undo that? I mean, do you have thoughts on how do you go from where we were to where we are, and then maybe back somewhere, in between? Or
well, I'm not going to sit here and say food should be more expensive when so many people have a hard enough time getting enough food to eat.
Yeah.
But I mean, if there is a silver lining to rising food costs, it's that we might treat food less cavalierly and view it as more of a sacred resource. But getting people more connected to their food.
That's the thing. I think
that's
the real connection. Like, if you know what it is. My son, years ago, wanted to kill this rabbit, because he's like a 12-year-old boy and there's a rabbit, right? And he's starts taking shots at it, whoa, what do you want to do here? And so anyway, he had read this book, how to catch and kill and rabbit and dress it and make, tan the hide and stuff, like The Dangerous Book for Boys, I think it's called.
Oh yeah, okay.
His grandmother got it for him. So I'm like, all right, go ahead, and he shoots it and right behind the eye, which is the spot, takes it out, and then he and his sister and I basically, spend some time butchering the rabbit, and it's like, well, what do you do next? He's like, you got to cut the head off. And it's like, and this is like a bunny, right. It's like, okay. So here's my knife, and he starts cutting the head off and cuts the feet off, and then you skin it. And anyway, the upshot being, not many people touch meat when it's still warm, when it was just recently alive, right?
Right.
And that experience of knowing where your food comes from, even if it's like, you know, a deer or a rabbit, changes your appreciation for the fact that like that thing was alive and I know my connection to it. And even if it's in the grocery store, I'm responsible for that whole chain of events. And it really, like, it adjusted him in terms of his relation, just that one time adjusted his relationship to meat.
And did you eat all of that rabbit?
Yeah.
I mean, I would have guessed you would. I mean, having that connection. I think with meat in particular.
It was Hassenpfeffer. You know?
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I think when something has died to be consumed, it's especially unethical to waste that stuff. And especially with how inefficient it is to grow meat.
So how much meat do we waste? I mean, is a lot of meat in these dumpsters?
A lot of meat, and people don't realize how much actually goes into producing 1 pound of meat. I mean, you have a couple 100 pounds of food, grain, that goes into producing a pound of meat. So how much food waste? It's really hard to figure out. But how much food waste is actually in 1 pound of meat?
Right.
It's tremendous. I think
this idea that it's also a living creature that it makes it a little more precious on top of everything that went into it. I mean, you can look at things through dollars and cents purely, but I don't think that's what we're here for.
Right.
You know. Like humanity, I don't think that's when we're at our highest. Is when it's just like everything's just an accounting sheet. Oh, well, this slice of meat, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it does tend to motivate us the most, but maybe that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, we're almost out of time. It goes fast, right? So there's still some good questions I didn't get to. For the folks that we read questions, we're going to send out the movie and we're going to send out the book, and we'll figure out who gets what, because I wasn't very good at keeping track of that, but we'll come up with something. Is there anything that you know, folks didn't ask that I didn't ask that you want to make sure that we covered here that people need to know?
I mean, I would say, you know, the take-home message, hopefully, for folks out there is that you can play a role, and I'm going to look directly into the camera.
Go ahead.
You have a role here.
We can all look in the camera.
Yeah, we can. Individuals really have agency in reducing the amount of waste that is created, and it's the kind of thing that's contagious. Just like recycling was once thought of as strange, now most everyone can do it.
Yeah.
So I really think it'll catch on, especially the more people think about it. You know, read my book, see the film. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think we've been saying it over and over again, but just awareness and education, awakening yourself to the fact that it's not just bread that needs to be donated, but really there needs to be a change coming from the stores, a lot of it, and start donating food every day of the week. All food should be going somewhere rather than ending up in a landfill.
Yeah.
We throw away 96 billion pounds of food. I mean, almost half of our food.
When you throw away, you can look at it any way you want. If you're throwing away food, you're throwing away money, you're throwing away your children's future, you're throwing away bullets if you want to look at your smart bombs. You know, you're throwing away
oil and water, resources,
and animals, and
and food is life. It's not meant to be wasted the way that we have begun to do so. It's just it's completely insane how much.
Well put. Yeah. Well put. And I think awareness is it, and I really want to thank you for the work that you've been doing on this to make people aware, and you as well, and the film and the book. Please go out and grab these things. Out on July 19th.
Yes.
Dive the film, and we want you to go see it. And this is on shelves now, right?
Now. Yep. Yeah. Paperback's coming out in September.
American Wasteland. On any e-readers, readers, any of that stuff.
It's not called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay.
But it is everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. So grab that, and we'll all get smarter about this. Because who knew?
Thank you.
Who knew?
And I appreciate the peppers. It's very nice.
I did my best.
No, thanks very much. It was fun.
All right, cue the music.